Hey everyone, this is Max at MaxCTCG. Thank you for joining me in another video. So in this video, we're going over the Fire King structure deck. So this can be a basics guide for beginner players really, and we're going to focus on all the cards in the structure deck that are worth playing, their synergies with the deck. We'll discuss different ways you can upgrade the deck from a structure deck. Look at some basic hand traps that are great in a lot of decks that are pretty cheap right now. Different budget, engines you can include, like Dogmatika or Tri-Brigade. And Tri-Brigade has done actually really well recently. And then we can also look at the more expensive cards that are going to be really good moving forward and are still solid in the deck now with the Sinful Spoils engine. We'll talk about new cards that are coming out like Bonfire and Maze of Millennia that just dropped. And then we'll also look at cards from Photon Knightmare, like Snake Eye Populace and the Promethean Princess. And we'll kind of discuss through these different synergies, look at different options for side deck cards based off what structure deck budget players will have options to, and then how you can upgrade those cards and what might be worth playing depending on different situations in the meta. And then also go through different side deck options you can consider playing as well. And that'll kind of round out the video. It's definitely going to be a longer one because we're going to be going through all the cards more in depth and really explaining them. So if you're more of a competitive player, you're familiar with a lot of these cards and how they actually work and their basic synergies, I'd move to the next section of the video where we go through the deck profile, discuss ratios and synergies from a deck perspective, not like individual card perspectives. Next, we have the extra deck cards. We have Super Slayer Ty-Phon Sky Crisis, more or less considered an extra deck staple at this point. Was cheaper, I think around $10 on pre-sale release, now I think closer to 20. During the turn, or turn after your opponent special summons 2 or more monsters from the extra deck, you can XYZ summon this card by using one monster you control with the highest attack, your choice of Tide. Transfer its materials to this card, and if you do, you cannot normal summon or special summon for the rest of this turn. While this card is exceed summoned, monster is on the field, neither player can activate effects with 3000 or more attack. Once per turn, you can detach one material from this card, return one monster from the field to the hand. This is a nice card for going second, because it does have a pretty heavy restriction that once you use it, your turn's pretty much over, but it gives you a way to counter your opponent's board, and a lot of the monsters in the game that have negates are 3000 or more attack, so by summoning this card, just by summoning any monster, you now threaten being able to turn off all those cards, making just even the summon of a monster threatening. Plus, you can use its effect to detach at least one card, because you'll have to have one material from the summon, and that can then bounce one of those cards, so it's no longer a threat on the field. So just a really solid card, and a really great way to kind of push through your opponent's board and give you maybe one last push to break through it, and then those 3000 attack point monsters still can't activate their effects, which is really nice. Or attack, so they can't even swing over this card, so they become pretty much useless. Next we have Zeus, good staple card in any deck that exceeds summon, or even if you're playing talents, you might play Zeus, even if your deck doesn't normally exceed summon, just because you can steal an exceed monster, attack with it, overlay Zeus on top of it, potentially get its effect to wipe the board. So it says once per turn, if an exceed monster battled this turn, you can also XYZ summon Divine Arsenal a Zeus Sky Thunder by using one XYZ monster you control as material, transfer its materials to this card. Quick effect, you can detach 2 materials from this card, send all cards from the field to the graveyard. Once per turn, if another card you control is destroyed by battle or opponent's card effect, you can attach one card from your hand, deck, or extra deck to this card's material. So a couple things to point out with this if you're new to using Zeus. The word battled is very specific. That means the monsters to successfully have attacked. They do something to make it where your monster can't attack, it doesn't count as battled. The other thing too is the quick effect to detach is not once per turn or per chain. So if you have 4 materials under Zeus, you can use its effect to board wipe. And even if they have like an infinite impermanence or maybe an effect failure if the timing triggers for that card, you can then detach again to board wipe a second time. So you can either have multiple board wipes that they have to try to play through, or even play through board wiping their board even if they have an effect negation. So really nice card. We have Slacker Magician. It's pretty much just used to make 2 level 1 monsters into a monster that can't be destroyed by battle, so you can go into Zeus. And then Downerd Magician can be overlaid on Slacker Magician. So what's nice is 2 level 1s make Slacker Magician, and then you attack, it doesn't get destroyed, you take some damage, you overlay Downerd, that will give 4 materials total. And so then when you overlay Zeus, you have a 4 material Zeus that can double board wipe. You have Almiraj, nice way of just getting a normal monster off the field, and can be useful for making lines to go into Decode Talker Heatsoul. Linkuriboh, another really useful card, especially with the Populace when that comes out. to be able to remove it from the field to put it in the spawn trap zone. Again, another dark link monster that can be used to make Heatsoul, since Heatsoul makes 2 Cyber monsters with different attributes. So a lot of times people use like Almiraj and AP, or you can use Linkuriboh and Sunlight Wolf. The effects are important, but so is the just monsters innate type. This also can be nice because opponent's monster declares an attack, you can tribute it, change that monster's attack to 0 to the end of the turn, so you can make it so you don't take damage. Also, if this card's in your grave, quick effect, you can tribute 1 level 1 monster, special summon this card. So this is nice for being able to target effect negation. So if later in the duel, if you try to summon a Onyx to search again, you can use Linkuriboh to tribute it to dodge maybe an infinite permanence or an effect veiler. Hita, the Fire Charmer Ablaze. This is going to be really good this format due to being able to summon fire monsters. So because fire is going to be so popular, it's going to be very easy to get cards out of your opponent's grave. And if you're in a mirror match, you can even use your opponent's cards to start your plays. So it says 2 monsters, including a fire monster. You target 1 fire monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your zone, discard points due. If this link summon card is destroyed by battle or is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while it's in its owner's monster zone, add 1 fire monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. So the main thing this is used for is link climbing, but you can also trigger your opponent's effects, which can be nice. And most people are going to use this to go into Promethean Princess. So we'll just cover this here. It's 2+ effect monsters, and it's a link 3. You cannot special monsters except fire, so you really want to use this in a fire-focused deck. You can only use each of the following effects for Promethean Princess. Bestower Flames once per turn. During your main phase, you can special summon 1 fire monster from your graveyard. If a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field while this card's in your graveyard, you can target 1 fire monster you control and 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy them, and if you do special summon this card. So this card is really good for multiple reasons. 1, it is an extender, so Hita can summon a fire monster from your opponent's grave. You can go into Promethean Princess. Promethean Princess can summon out Hita back or any other fire monster, potentially triggering their effects, and then can be linked away to go into Amblowhale. And we'll go over Amblowhale in a second. And then on your opponent's turn, if you try to special summon, you could bring Promethean Princess back, destroying one of their cards, and like the Amblowhale or another monster, for example. And then if they don't get rid of the Promethean Princess on your turn, you have extension play again. So it's going to be a really good card when it comes out in Phantom Nightmare. So the next card we'll go over in relation to the Promethean Princess is Amphibious Swarmship Amblowhale. So this is a really good card in combination with Promethean Princess, and it's going to be like a really mainstream combo that we're going to see after Phantom Nightmare. And how this card works is it gains 200 attack for each link monster in the graveyard, so both players' graveyards, so it's going to get pretty big. So you can only use each of the following effects of Amphibious Swarmship Amblowhale once per turn. If this card is destroyed, you can target 1 link 3 or lower monster in either graveyard, special summon it. If a link 3 or lower monster on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect while this card is in your graveyard, banish this card from your graveyard to destroy 1 card on the field. So I think unlike other decks that are fire decks that are going to be utilizing the Promethean Princess, the Amblowhale actually has pretty good synergy with Fire Kings due to their ability to destroy this card. So they're not going to be reliant on just using Princess to destroy it. One of the main things you can do is just when your opponent summons a monster, you can then trigger, or special summons a monster, you can then trigger Promethean Princess in the grave, and you can target your Amblowhale and one of their monsters, destroying it. And then when Promethean Princess is summoned, you can then summon a link 3 or lower monster from your grave. But you gotta realize if you're using Princess for this, Princess is going to be on the field and that is going to be locking you into fires. So cards you'd be able to summon out this deck would be like Sunlight Wolf if that's in the graveyard, Pitknight Earlie if that's in the graveyard, Hita if you use that to make the Amblowhale. So you'd be stuck into fire links. If you were to use Kieran to pop Amblowhale, you could then special summon like IP Masquerena back. This is a cool effect to link summon on the opponent's turn. We'll go over that card in a minute. And that could be another way to get an interesting interruption before type locking yourself into fire. And if you were to use like Kieran for this example, that would still leave a fire on field for Princess to use later. So it's different things to consider with this card. It's really nice. And then you also get the bonus of if a link 3 or lower is destroyed, you get to banish this to pop a card, which is really nice. And that is a non-targeting destruction. Another card that we can go over is Pitknight Earlie. So I think this could be a nice card for helping play through Nibiru. I believe the combo for this summons on the 5th summon, so they could technically Nibiru you. But one thing that's nice about this card is that it recurs itself during the end phase. So it says here, when a monster this card points to activates its effect, quick effect, you can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. changes its attack to 0, also negate its effect. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it's destroyed by battle or card effect, and sent there this turn, you can summon this card. So this card's nice because when it's a Fire Link 2, you can bring back off Amblowhale. It's also a card that will recur itself when you destroy it with cards like the Fire King Island. So it has nice synergy there. It does help where, if your opponent waits to Nibiru you longer into the field, you can destroy this card with Fire King Island, meaning it'll come back during the end phase. So worst case situation, at the very least, have a way to have a fire on field to use Princess if they summon a monster. So that's helpful for that. In a worst case situation, the deck's very grindy, so it should still be able to do okay if they can't kill you that turn. And it also has synergies with being able to be summoned off Amblowhale to a zone that you can have it like connecting to another monster. That way, if it's linked, when that monster uses its effect, you can also then make it so that way you can negate a monster's effect and change its attack to 0. Now, the way the effect negation works is it's not going to work on monsters that trigger on summon, but if your opponent summons a monster, you can then activate an effect and target that monster, make its attack 0, and then negate its effect. So it'll only work on ignition effects that your opponent's using. If it's trigger effect that's happening like on summon, it's not going to be able to actually activate. But still making a monster 0, it can be helpful for your opponent not being able to do as big of a push. So I think it's a really cool card that should be played, especially post Phantom Nightmare. And we have IP Masquerena. This has always been a really great card ever since the use of Knightmare Unicorn, which was the original target for this. So this card says, during your opponent's main phase, you can quick effect. Immediately after this effect resolves, link summon one link monster using materials you control, including this card. You can only use the effect of IP Masquerena once per turn. The link's monster that uses this card as material cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This card, again, used to be combined with Knightmare Unicorn. And we'll go over this card too, because the main target is SP Little Knight, but this is, I think, a little bit over $100 card right now. So we could use Unicorn as a budget replacement. So the original effect would be to link summon to Unicorn, and then Unicorn says if this card is link summoned, you can discard one card, target one card on the field, shuffle it into the deck. Then if this card was co-linked, when its effect was activated, you can draw one card. You can only use each effect on Knightmare Unicorn once per turn, while any co-linked Nightmare monster are on the field. For your normal draw and your draw phase, draw one card for each different card name among those co-linked Nightmare monsters instead of destroying one. So for the most part, getting the whole co-linked effect doesn't generally happen. So the main thing this would be used for is on summon, you can discard a card, target a card on the field, and shuffle it back into the deck, and it was a non-destruction removal, which is nice. But SP Little Knight has really power crept this card. So with IP Masquerena, you can go into SP Little Knight, and this card has 2 effects, and you don't need a discard on summon, which is nice, so it's less resource intensive. So it says if this card is link summoned using a fusion, synchro, exceed, or link monster, which IP Masquerena is a link monster, as material, you can target one card on the field or in either graveyard and banish it. So on summon as a trigger effect to banish a card on field or grave, which is great. Also, your monsters cannot attack directly this turn, but that's going to be the downside. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including a monster you control, banish both until the end phase. So this is a really interesting setup for how this card works, because on summon, it can banish a card from field or grave. So you can remove a Barong, you can remove Garunix, you can remove different things, Ponix, that are going to trigger and give them resources. You can also banish a card on the field. But let's say you try to banish a card on the field, and they try to use like infinite impermanence to negate your banish. As long as there's 2 monsters on the field, you can banish SP Little Knight, targeting it and another monster, maybe your opponent's or one of your own, and you can then avoid that disruption. So it's going to take, at least 2 cards to interrupt the summon of SP Little Knight. So that's just a really amazing effect that you can be able to do because of how many resources it takes your opponent to stop it. And you also get, to some extent, a reoccurring resource because it'll banish a monster, come back, maybe you can banish a different monster. So it's a card that can be really useful. You can also use this to dodge from interruptions on your board while making it. So if you make SP Little Knight and your main boss interruption and they try to Nibiru you, you can use SP Little Knight to target your monster and Little Knight to banish both to the end phase and then bring them back. So you could use this defensively, offensively. So this card is really amazing. There is a reason why it has its price tag. Unfortunately, a lot of that just more has to do with rarities and the fact that we don't get multiple rarities for card. So again, if you don't have Little Knight, I would go with Unicorn as this option. Next, you can go into Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf. So this is really known for being really good in the Salamangreat deck, but it does have a lot of synergy here, which is nice as well. So it says if a monster is normal or special summoned to this card, to a zone this card points to, except during the damage step, you can add one fire monster from your grave to your hand, but for the rest of this turn, you cannot normal summon or set or special summon monsters with the same name as the monster added to your hand. During your main phase, if you control this card that was link summoned using Salamangreat Sunlight as material, you can add one Salamangreat spell or trap from your grave to your hand. You notice each effect of Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf once per turn. So in Salamangreat, they would do a mechanic called Reincarnation Link Summoning, where they would link off using its own monster, and they could do that through the field spell in that deck, getting both effects. But in this deck, we're not really focused on the second part. We're really just focused on the recursion that this gives you. So a standard like recursion could just be to get a resource for follow-up. You could also get Ash Blossom back to your hand if you want to get another hand trap to be able to use on your opponent's turn. It could be an option since you just won't be able to use it the turn you get it back to your hand, but you could use it the following turn, which would most likely be your opponent's. A lot of times what people are using this for though, is they're actually getting back the Kieran. What this allows you to do is now have interruption on your opponent's turn with Kieran by recurring that resource. So it's really helpful for the deck. You can go kind of different ways. Probably the best two targets would either be Kieran or Ash Blossom. So again, really great to card. Can also bring this card back with Amblowhale as well. So really good synergy. Next we also have Decode Talker Heatsoul. This card does let you get multiple draws and is really good in a deck where you mostly hand traps. Ideally, you might be drawing into interruption. It says this card is 2+ Cyberse monsters with different attributes. That's why we kind of have a combination of cards here with like Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf and Linkuriboh, or Salamangreat Almiraj and IP Masquerena. They can all go into this card. It gains 500 attack for each monster it points to. It can get decently big, over 3,000 if you have 2 monsters it's pointing to, or even higher if you can get the link zone it's pointing to on your opponent's field to have a monster in it as well. It would get 1,500 attack total. This quick effect, you can pay 1,000 life points to draw 1 card. Then if your life points are 2,000 less, you can apply this effect. Banish this card from the field, and if you do, special summon link 3 or lower Cyberse monster from your extra deck, except Decode Talker Heatsoul. So in a Code Talker deck, that second effect might be useful, but generally what people are using it for is that you can pay 1,000 life points on your turn, draw a card, and then during the draw phase of your opponent's turn, you can pay another 1,000 to draw another card. Now it's important to do this in the draw phase on your opponent's turn, because that way you can play around Droll and Lockbird, because you'll be adding a card from deck to hand, and if you do it during the draw phase, they can't use Scroll. Ideally, that's 2 cards that you would get, and ideally, if some of those cards are hand traps, you might be able to kind of keep your board alive for the following turn where you could ideally win the duel. Another card I think to consider playing is Underworld, Goddess of the Closed World. I always like having this card as a comfort pick in my deck if I can use it, and it also works nicely with having IP Masquerena, because you could IP Masquerena into Goddess if you have enough materials on your opponent's turn, which is a nice play. But the main thing Goddess is used for is it's a way to out unaffected monsters that your opponent might be playing. Now, the big one in this deck is Noir that we looked at earlier. This card can use Noir as link material to be able to summon it. Now, one thing that's nice with with Underworld Goddess that you don't get with like Herald of the Abyss or Exquisite Encore is a card you don't have to draw. You don't have to rely on the luck of RNG to be able to get this card on the field. But the hard thing with it is it's a link 5, 4+ effect monsters. To summon this card, your opponent has one of the monsters, so it says you can also use 1 monster your opponent controls as link material to summon this card. That means that you're going to need 4 monsters on your side of the field, plus 1 monster on your opponent's, that equals 4, and that would be 5 materials total. And the lowest you can go would be if that monster your opponent has as a link 2, or you have a link 2, then you could use 3 monsters total on your side of the field, and then 1 link 2 your opponent controls, or 1 monster your opponent controls, as long as there's a link 2 involved. That would give you the 4 materials, and the link 2 would count as 2 towards that 5 total rating. And it says, if this card is link summoned, you can negate the effect of all face-up monsters on your opponent currently controls. So that could be a nice way to get interruption with IP. You could remove a troublesome monster from the field, while also negating all the other monsters in the field. And it says this link summon card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects unless they target. So a little bit of a kind of weird protection effect, since a lot of cards do target, but that could come up. And it says once per turn when your opponent activates a card or effect that includes special summoning a monster from the grave, quick effect, you can negate the activation. So again, this doesn't destroy, so that's nice. If you can negate a Fire King card trying to special summon from the grave, you're not going to trigger its effect, it'll just negate it. So you do get a lot out of this card, being able to remove a monster from their field, potentially negate the effect of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls, and that's a permanent negation, and then also potentially get a special summon negation out of the graveyard. Plus it has 3000 attack. So overall, very solid card. I definitely like playing this, especially in formats where there are unaffected monsters that you want to remove. But I could see this potentially being caught if you feel like, I don't know, especially your Pearly matchup is fine, and you might be playing Exil's Encore or other cards. So a couple cards that are from the structure deck here. We have Coach King Giantrainer. 3 level 8 monsters. You can detach 1 material from this card, draw 1 card, and reveal it. Then, if it was a monster, inflict 800 damage to your opponents. You cannot cadet the battle phase the turn you activate this effect. You can only use this effect of Coach King Giantrainer up to thrice per turn. That means you could use this up to 3 times to draw 3 cards and potentially burn your opponent for 2400 life points. It is a really good card, especially in decks that can summon multiple level 8s, but I think that is going to be quite hard to do in Fire Kings. Ideally, you'll probably only ever have 2. And I think part of the reason they did this is because this was an expensive card used in Dark World. I think maybe one other deck at the most, but generally Dark World. And just due to that, it was a nice place to give it a reprint, and it kind of makes sense with its potentially being able to be used in Fire Kings. But ideally, this would be a card I would look to replace as I get other options as I upgrade the Fire King deck. The next card would be Diamond Direwolf. 2 level 4 monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 material from this card. Target a beast, beast warrior, or winged beast you control, and 1 other card on the field, destroy them. To be an iconic, rank 4 staple when it came out. Just being able to pop other cards. Ideally, sometimes you just pop itself, worst case situation, and the card your opponent controls. But also in this deck, you could pop other cards, triggering your Fire King effects, destroying cards on the field. Pretty slow effect, and doesn't give you the most value, unfortunately. But at least it does have some synergy in this deck, so again, another card I would look to replace as you upgrade the extra deck. Another card to consider that is pretty cheap due to reprints, especially from the Rarity Collection, is Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. A great card in Orcust, but also can be used in any deck that can summon 2 level 8s. It says you can only special summon 1 Dingirsu, the Orcust Evening Star, once per turn. You can also exceed summon this card by using an Orcust Link monster you control as material. If cards you control be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish 1 material from this card instead. If this card is special summoned, you activate 1 of these effects. Summon 1 card your opponent controls to the grave. Attach 1 of your banished machine monsters to this card. Attach 1 of your banished machine monsters to this card as material. So the main reason people use this card is that it's a non-targeting send to the graveyard, so it doesn't destroy and it doesn't target. This was great against cards like Dragoon and other cards that have targeting protection. Pretty easy to summon. And you also get the protection from destruction effects. If your opponent tries to use like Harpy's Feather Duster, you can stop that destruction. If they try to destroy 1 of your monsters in battle, you can protect it. So decent card and a nice pickup, since it's very cheap, I think under $1 for sure. And then we have Relinquished Anima. This can be another option if you don't want to play Linkuriboh, since it does give you a kind of way to force an interrupt. So this card says it takes 1 level 1 monster, so it works with Ponix or any of the Snake Eye cards. So you can target 1 face-up monster this card points to, equip that face-up monster to this card. You can use this effect of Relinquished Anima once per turn, and this gains attack equal to equipped monsters. So this can be nice if your opponent summons monsters in front of the extra monster zones. That's going to be column 2 and 4. If they summon anything into those zones, you can just link Ponix into that and try to steal that card. It could be nice if your opponent's not paying attention to their zone placement, and you could potentially absorb 1 of those monsters or bait in a gate before going into something else. If you do use Ponix for that though, it would be sending it to the graveyard without destruction, so you're not going to recur it during the standby phase, so it's something to think about. Another card to consider is Apollousa, Bow the Goddess. Just nice rank 4 monster that can negate monster effects. So it says here 2+ monsters with different names. It says you can only control 1 Apollousa, Bow the Goddess. The original attack of this card becomes 800 times the number of link materials used for its summon. Once per chain, when your opponent activates a monster effect, you can make this card lose exactly 800 attack, and if you do, negate that activation. And one thing to point out with Goddess, a lot of times people would want to summon her with 4 monsters, giving her 3200 attack, making her harder to deal with. And that way, even if you do a negate, it would go to a minimum of 2400 attack, still making it hard for your opponent to attack over it. But due to the introduction of Super Slayer Ty-Phon, I think I would try to summon this card with only 3 materials, giving it 2400 attack at most. Because if your opponent were to just normal summon a monster and link it to Ty-Phon, if your Apollousa is 3200 or more, you can't activate the effect, and they could just return it back to the deck. So pretty easily outing this card. If you keep it at 2400, you still get negates, it still might be a little difficult for your opponent to run over with 1600 attack. So you at least get 1 negate, maybe 2 out of it, and they can't just link into Ty-Phon to bypass this card. So that covers all of the extra deck cards and all the cards that you should kind of have an idea of how to play if you're wanting to pick up the Fire King deck. And this covers different routes, so once you understand this as a beginner player, you'll have a really good understanding of the deck and the different engines you could potentially play. In the next video, what we're going to do is, now that hopefully all the players that are new to the deck are really caught up on the different engines and how they work, we'll look at the different decks and discuss how they work from a deck perspective, not an individual card perspective. Look at ratios, talk about the synergies a little bit more, and then after that we'll do a combo video showing you all the different combos that the different engines can do, an idea of how the deck actually plays. And then from there we'll cover the side deck patterns. Alright, well, I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I know it's a much longer one, but there'll be timestamps for everything, so that way you can easily find the information you're looking for. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. See you there. And if you want to join and become a patron to support the channel because you like the content I'm making, you can find the links in my video description, about page on my YouTube channel or my website. You can see different things that will come with each of the tiers, as well as each tier having a 7-day free trial to try it out and see if you like it before committing financially. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you guys in future videos.